Hey there, I'm Carrie, social worker and founder of PlayMotion Kids. Welcome to Wait, Am I Saving the World? This podcast is for people shaping childhood at home, in classrooms, and beyond. Around here, we're having real conversations about what it takes to raise the next generation of change makers. We talk child welfare, child development, parenting, education, and everything it takes to show up for kids without losing yourself or your sanity in the process. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, everybody. I am so excited that you are listening in on this episode. This is Carrie with another episode of Wait, Am I Saving the World? And today's guest is Tami Lysher. She is an educator and movement specialist with over 40 years of experience in early childhood education. She is the creator of Move into Calm, a trauma-informed approach that uses movement, breathwork, and connection to support nervous system regulation in children. She's a certified Pilates and yoga instructor, nervous system integration facilitator, and she works closely with families, educators, and children impacted by trauma, sensory challenges, and learning differences. I am so excited to have her here to talk about how movement can help you move into calm. And thank you, Tami, so much for joining me today. I'm so excited that you are able to visit with me and we can talk a little bit more about this topic.
Thank you, Carrie, for having me, number one. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Awesome. So you have so much experience working with children and with families, especially in the early childhood space. So tell me a little bit about how that started. What drew you to movement-based and trauma-informed work?
Okay. The movement piece was almost like a second career. So I taught multiple genres over the years. I taught spinning, I taught yoga, I taught Pilates, all within like a gym setting. But I also began to bring it into teaching early childhood educators. This has been a long time ago, probably at least 20 years ago. I was trained in a Head Start program, and it was called I Am Moving, I Am Learning. And so it kind of unlocked the doors of why it was really necessary. And I used yoga as a foundation, working with teachers. And when I say teacher, I mean early childhood teachers. And just giving them an understanding of what it really was and why the kids needed to move their bodies. And I think that over the course of the years, I always knew somehow that I was going to bring in more of the trauma pieces of it. I worked for Head Start programs and I saw children that were directly impacted, not only the children, but their mothers that were directly impacted by trauma. And when I see like how it impacted their let's just say the parents first, their mobility and their coping mechanisms, if they had like multiple children, and how it impacted their health. And those were things that were really red flags for me. And then to see the kids come to school, and the moms would be all upset. So then the kids would come to school and they would be all upset. And so there was really no like mechanism that was helping the parents understanding that trauma can really be a big part of this. And intergenerational trauma can be another big piece of it.
Sure. So tell me, why is it so important for children to move their bodies? Especially if you're working with families, I'd imagine you need to get the buy-in of the why before you get into the how.
Yeah. And so the moving pieces of it is children are not meant to sit still. Children's bodies are meant to move, and it's so important. And I think that so oftentimes educators and parents want to give their children or grandchildren, depending on where they are, a phone or a piece of technology that will keep them quiet. But in reality, what they really need is to move their bodies. So When you think about brain development, and we talk about, and I can talk a lot about that, but the brain development, the kids need to move their bodies. They need to cross their midline. So if you've ever saw a 2.5 or a 3-year-old attempt to do a jumping jacks, for example, with taking their arms overhead, they can't coordinate the lower body and the upper body. So they need opportunities that are going to give them the abilities to learn how to move through all of the developmental milestones. And if they miss some of those developmental milestones, it can have an impact on their ability to learn later.
And here's my next question based on that. What is actually happening? You were talking about like mom's upset, the kids are upset, so they're showing up to school that way. What is actually happening inside of a child's body when you are seeing the dysregulation on the outside, but what's actually happening on the inside? I know
So
that's a
if I
lot.
get, no, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a really good question, because so number one, it impacts their breath. So they become shallow breathers, which means that most of the time children will become mouth breathers, which can have a bigger bearing on their facial structures. When our bodies are stressed, we become rigid. Our shoulders might be hiked up, and this is whether you're a child or an adult. It impacts our hearing, so it closes off parts of our hearing. There's a little muscle inside of our hearing canal that actually shuts down hearing. So when I would see a mother getting a child out of the car and they weren't moving fast enough, and maybe they were raising their voice, and when they raise their voice, the child just starts to shut down. And you can see it in the look on their faces. You can see it when they're walking through the door. They're either usually probably crying, some kind of, or they're being defiant. So they're like they want to run away from their parents. I mean, I've seen all of these things happen when a child has been dysregulated, but it usually takes the parent and the child. So if the mother is dysregulated, mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, and if they are dysregulated, meaning that their nervous system is all out of whack and they're worried about something to get to work on time, so they're trying to push the child, and the kids just don't have the capacity to do those kind of things. So then they're going to come to school and it's going to shut down their learning. And what I mean by that is a child has to be calm and focused in order for them to be able to have the ability to even begin to think about learning. The brain's shut down.
Right. So how do we either figure out that we actually have a dysregulation problem versus a behavior problem? Or should we just treat everybody as if, like, let's regulate before we do X, Y, and Z? Or what is best practice there?
Well, I like to say, and I know you picked another one that I always say, but we have to regulate to educate. And through that is we start with moving our bodies to help to regulate the emotions. So to go back to your question, I think that when we look at the disparities in the world right now, and I don't care if we're in Texas or where I'm in Michigan, there is a lot of dysregulation, especially here in the United States. And there's a lot of people that are, moving up and down, and there's a lot of increase in mental health issues, both in adults and in youth, but also in children as well. And I think that when we think about behavior, whether they're acting out and they're being defiant or they're being defensive, it's a mechanism for them to communicate with us. Their outward behavior is driving an emotion that's underneath. So the emotion, if they're angry at whatever, maybe something happened at home and the child is angry or agitated when they come to school, and they might come in and they might, I don't know, hit another child. And I'm just using those as examples. So when we begin to dig deeper and looking at why is a child's behavior, what's the child's behavior really telling us?
For sure. Try and remember that every behavior is an unmet need.
It is.
What
Yeah.
what is that telling us? So what do you teach early childhood educators when you have a child coming into school and you can see that there's a problem? What do you teach them to do if we're trying to regulate before we educate? What are the actual tactical steps that you suggest that they do to move them into where they can regulate better, listen, and actually come to school and learn.
So I'm going to say something that maybe some of the listeners might not like to hear, but I'm going to say it, is it has to start with us. As a parent, as a grandparent, as a teacher, we have to be calm. We are the calming force. Like, we are their anchors. And if the anchor is really, like, just if the anchor is really unregulated, or they have a lot and they're bringing their work, like they're bringing home life into school, let's just say an educator, and they're bringing those things into the classroom, and their nervous system is all heightened. You can't regulate a classroom when you yourself are not regulated. And that's a big piece. And it's also something that I firmly believe that it is so important for us to have a better understanding of our own, I'm just going to use the word nervous system, or how stress impacts us. Because when we're constantly walking and we're stressed out, our breath becomes shallow, our bodies are tense, just like the kids, just like I talked about. But it's also, there's other things that go along with high levels of stress. We could have backaches, and we can have other health related issues. There's all kinds of studies that talk about autoimmune disorders and things like that over chronic periods of stress. So, and as women, mostly that are in early childhood settings, I'm not saying that there aren't men, but I would say the majority are women. It's important for us to begin to take care of ourselves, because we cannot, just like when you're on the airplane, they always tell you, put on the air mask first, and then you can take care of others around you. And when we don't take care of ourselves, and that's why I think it's so important for every woman, and I don't care what we're doing, self-care is critical. And it might be something as meaning of sitting down at your desk and drinking water out of a straw, cool water out of a straw, that can help your nervous system down regulate. Having things in the classroom that can help, a squishy ball, like at their desk, or even a ball that they can roll in the palms of their hands. And I know you asked for examples later in the video, but those are just two things for an educator before, and pause, take a breath, and then really look and open your eyes and observe, what is the child's behavior trying to tell us?
Oh my goodness.
Maybe they need to be hugged. Maybe they need somebody to get down on their level and talk to them in a calm, collective voice. Maybe they need to just pause, hold the child's hand, and maybe take a breath with them.
Oh my goodness, Tammy. And I hear you, and I know how important that is. But also, as a mom and somebody that works in early childhood spaces, I also know realistically what it's like to, you know, have to put some of your own stuff aside to go in and be able to do your work. What do you tell clients that you're working with? Maybe they understand the importance, but also, how do you get to the point of you are actively taking care of yourself and
Yep.
remembering to do that for yourself so that you can provide better to your students or your children, but in a way that feels doable, I
Yep.
guess, because it can be hard
Yep.
when you have your own stress going
Yes.
on.
So I'm going to just share a little story. And this just actually happened. I worked with a mom, and her son was like, he's 4-ish, and he was having all kinds of behavioral issues. But mom and dad are expecting another baby, and his behavior started becoming like really, really escalating. And I started first with their son, because I feel like a lot of times I have to go in through what I call the back door. And I start with the child first and say, and I'll model, like, the first couple of times, especially if I'm working privately with them, I'll model what breathing looks like. And then begin to talk about like other tools of things that they could use at home, but also the importance of just even like reconnecting with your child when you get home from school. Is that a time when like, if you go right from coming in the door, taking off your clothes, maybe it means you sit down on the couch for 5 minutes and you talk about how your day was, or maybe read a book. So that connection or co-regulation is just so important with for your child. So this mom went on to say to me, because she came in She was smiling. I said, what have you done differently? And she said, like, her husband wasn't there. And so, like, getting dinner was always a big chore for her. And she just said, giving him things to do at the counter in the kitchen. And it was something as simple as all that she did. And then, like, taking their son and going outside and walking with him. That's all they did. The dad and him just went outside and walked. They weren't like overly physically active, but just that time, the connection piece of it was so important. And then she just, like teaching him how to blow, just blow out like the inhales. So inhale and then make the exhale longer on the duration. And we'll talk about that in a minute when you ask me more strategies and things like that. But I think that it's really important to go back to the understanding that when children have gone through trauma, they like the attachment and the co-regulation, those are the pieces that are missing because there's often this fragmented relationship between the parent and the child, and it can cause more dysregulation within the child's body because they're confused.
Right. Would you say that's even more important for maybe children who aren't placed in their home?
Oh my
With
gosh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, heavens. For a number of years I worked with foster care parents, and they could never understand why the child didn't want to go to sleep. And for example, like when I would do meetings with foster care parents and talk about, like, number one, maybe sleeping was a form of that, like a crib, for example, might have been a form of a punishment, but yet, they would cry and cry and cry because they didn't feel safe. And I think that there's a lot of children at least in the state of Michigan, that are in foster care services. And we just need to step back. But then again, the foster parents also have to have an understanding of, and this is my bias because I don't feel like there's enough education for foster parents. And I know there's a huge shortage for foster parents, but it's just so important to begin to understand that, these children are coming to us with lots of trauma, maybe lots of multiple issues, like health related issues that it's going to put them in and out of the hospital, that could also move, and like the attachment piece or that co-regulation piece can be really hard, or it can be strained for a child because if there's not been anybody that's been consistent, that child doesn't feel safe. And what I always like to say is we can say our classrooms are safe, our homes are safe, but until that child feels safe, nothing's going to change.
Right. Yes. And there's a difference between felt safety
Yes.
and saying it. So
Yes. Exactly.
important. You know what I love about what you just talked us through is how simple that is, but what a huge impact it was. Going for a short walk, keeping the child in sight and having them work on a little activity while you cook dinner, or if they're old enough, maybe even helping with something with dinner. And that's such a simple, easy rhythm or routine to add into your day, but it's going to make a huge difference in how your family is actually connecting and running and the way
Mhm.
that they're able to spend their day. So I love that. So
And the other thing I just want to say is, like, not necessarily always relying on tablets and um yeah, and cell phones and things like that. There is a book that I have often referred to, and it's called The Anxious Generation. Have you read it before, Carrie?
I have not, no.
So it's talking
I'm
about the
writing it down though,
yeah,
Tammy.
it's talking about the impact of um social media and like technology on the younger generation. That's why they call it the anxious generation. I mean, because when I see a child, she was 18 months old and she didn't know how to read or turn the pages in the book. And she was doing like this on the book to try to get the pages to turn.
My goodness.
It's really, I feel very strongly that, there's all kinds of studies out there, and Carrie, and I'm sure you're aware of them. And even sometimes even licensing regulations in the state of Michigan, they don't want children exposed to any kind of videos until they're 3 years of age.
Mm, yes, but the reality is that
Oh, of course. But
yeah,
in right, and in childcare centers, we know, they are being exposed.
Right.
They are being exposed.
So, speaking of the difference between felt safety and like saying this classroom is safe, what are some signs that a child doesn't feel safe in their
Oh,
body?
okay. If they don't feel safe, they're a lot of times going to be guarded. They don't want to have another adult touch them or hug them. And I'm talking, let's just say 2.5 and up, where a child would be resistant to like any kind of touch. They may shut down and not want to eat or drink. Um, their play might be more solitary play as opposed to cooperative play, or even, like side by side parallel play. I think that um, when kids don't feel safe, the teachers automatically assume that their classroom is safe, though the child should feel safe. And the safe pieces of it has to come from within. They have to feel an attachment to a teacher. And I can tell you as an example, I worked with a classroom, and the little boy, he was been there maybe, I don't know, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. And he had an attachment to a teacher. So she was his primary caregiver. So he would have been maybe around 2. And on one particular day, mom dropped the little boy off, and the primary teacher was not there. And he did not have a good start to his day because his person that he trusted and felt safe with was not there. It's not saying that he had not been around the other teacher, but it's really like he cried. He did not want mom to leave. And a lot of times that's why young children, especially in the very beginning of like even drop off and pick up at childcare centers, they have a hard time with it because they're not bonded or they're not connected to those teachers. That's why having a slow start into or going to visits classrooms, but their bodies become rigid and they might stiffen up when the teacher, they're like when a parent wants to hold them, they'll stiffen up and not want to interact. It might actually go in. When I say inward, they might want to play, or they might want to just sit and hold, like if they had a stuffed animal or a favorite blanket that they had at school, you might just see them sit by themselves or cry
Right.
long. Yeah.
So, you created the Move into Calm framework that we talked about earlier, and it has 3 pillars. Can you talk to us a little bit about what those are and why they are so important?
Okay, so Move into Calm actually started long before it actually the inception of it, because I used to do a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now with the teachers before I even had the framework. And so it was through it was through lots of, I'm going to just say like I had to go through a lot of iterations with words before I really came to these. So it has to start with connection or co-regulation. And it's so important to have an understanding of why that's important. If we're early childhood educators, we understand why the attachment piece is critical. When children feel safe, they're going to respond, they're going to learn, and they're going to move their bodies. When they're not connected, they're going to be defiant, they're going to be possibly there's going to be disciplinary problems in the classroom. There might be delays in learning or speech. So the first one is connection or co-regulation. The second one is movement, but along with movement is breath. And I do a whole series of just, and it doesn't have to be fancy breathing, but a lot of times when children might even be breath holders. And we see that with kids when they're crying and they gasp because they can't breathe. But a lot of times if kids are upset, they hold their breath and they don't even realize it. And then the third pieces of it is the nervous system. So the whole lens of what we do that I teach is through the nervous system. And the gentleman who is really responsible for that, his name is Dr. Stephen Porges, and he coins the polyvagal theory. And I'm not going to talk about the depth of the polyvagal theory, but it's basically
That'll
through,
be another episode, Tammy.
it absolutely could be, but it's when you think about like what's called social engagement. So and it's through our face. So like I'm sitting here looking at you. Yes, we're thousands of miles, maybe couple thousand of miles away, but you're smiling at me, we're having interactions with each other. And so we are, even in essence, we are co-regulating even this far away. When people are not co-regulating, or there's this fragmentation, it could, I mean, even if like two kids in the classroom are fighting over a toy, that's where, you're going to see that whole like, it was mine kind of thing. But the teacher mediates, and she uses her face, her voice. All of those things are social cues. And so, the teacher has to bring the kids back around, or the parent has to bring the kids back around. So this framework can be used both in the classroom and in homes. And I think that it's really important to talk about, when we look at it, and the nervous system is still relatively, like, it's been around a long time. And I can tell you that I was doing nervous system work back in 1999, and I didn't even realize it from teaching teachers about co-regulation. And I taught early childhood programs at the university level. So I was a teacher mentor, essentially, is what I have been over the past a long, long time. But it's really, those are the kind of things, and just using things like humming or singing, or like rhythmic things, where, like, to sit and rock a baby, like that rhythmic motion, those are all calming and soothing for the kids. And so even through Move Into Calm, we look at what strategies can you, the adult, find that are good for you. Like, what are things that help you solve, like help you calm down when you're upset. And I can tell you one that, and I didn't even realize, and I've been doing the nervous system work continuously now for the past 5 years. And I've worked with a lady named Chantel Lopez, and she created a program called Integrated Nervous System Facilitator. And so then I went on, and now I've been enrolled now for the past, I guess, 6 months through Butler University, and it's called Applied Education in Neuroscience. And their framework looks at trauma, adversity, and the nervous system. But Dr. Lori has created, she's got 4 pillars to the A&E, or AN framework. And we're giving the kids language around things. And, just even teaching the language, like, when I don't feel safe, I get a bellyache. My grandson went to school, and he kept telling my daughter, she's in the field of social work as well, so we understand the same language, but he had a stomach ache. And so when you really got to the bottom of it, why was your tummy hurting? And then he would say, I was kind of scared going to school, but he's got the language. And not all kids have language, or they have adults in their lives that can begin to, like, look at those kind of things. So, but it's giving the parents, caregivers, grandparents, whoever, this work is for whoever, anybody. It could be a bus driver. It's for anybody who works with kids. And I don't care if they're an infant or they're college age.
Oh my goodness, that's so good. Tammy, I love that. And I love that he has the language for that, but not just that, being able to recognize it, right? Because being able to recognize it even in your own body, because there are some adults that don't know how to give language to what it is they're feeling, or why it is they're doing something that they're doing.
So,
So,
Carrie, I don't know if I told you this in what I wrote, but I just want to share this with you. But I teach Pilates at our local community college, and I work with many, like, young teens. Like, so they're in, like, they call it a middle college. So these would be kids who would still be in high school. And I brought in the nervous system work with them really heavily this past semester. And so beginning to get them, when you get stressed, where do you feel? And their answers were, me on the first day of school, I don't know. I don't know where I feel it in my body. And so by the time they were finished, they had an understanding of why it's so important that we need to breathe, and why it's important to understand our bodies when they start, have a headache, or we've got neck aches, or we've got back aches. So it's really being aware, because if nobody's ever taught you how it feels in your body, or even emotions, because oftentimes, if we were raised in environments where people didn't talk, we had other ways of coping, not feeling, maybe like having a hard time people pleasing, or hard time making decisions, or constantly being busy, like never stopping. and then overachieving. Those are all can be signs of unresolved trauma.
Oh my goodness. So I don't resonate with that at all, Tammy. So I love that you mentioned emotions though, because when you talked about like where do you feel that in your body, that is one of my favorite exercises. And it's a great exercise to use with kids and not just about bad things. So not just about, or I should
Oh
say bad in
yeah,
quotation
yeah,
marks, but so not just where do you feel angry or where do you feel sad, but also where do you feel it in your body when you're happy?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that how does your body feel when you start to jump? And
Yes.
I think that sometimes when we, as adults, we forget how to play. And it's so important for us to have some kind of interaction. Like, and I'm just going to say this because I'll have people say to me, well, I don't play with my kids. Well, like your kids are jumping around. You don't have to jump all the way to the ceiling. I'm talking about lifting your heels up off the floor and moving your body. That will, you'd be surprised how it makes you feel.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, my bladder won't let me jump up all the way to the ceiling, but
Yeah. Okay, so more.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I can lift my
Yeah.
heels off the floor.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's fun. I will say, even in some adult, because I teach some yoga at an adult mental health facility,
Yeah.
and one of my favorite things to do is really a Pilates move, but it's sitting like an easy pose and holding onto your feet and then rolling back and then using enough leverage to roll back up. And so you're kind of rolling back and forth, and people have a blast with that.
Yeah.
It's because it's fun and it's silly and it's not something that we just do on a daily basis. And we forget how to use our bodies to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that when you begin to explore like balance, for example, because I also am a Pilates and yoga teacher. And so, but when you think about like balance, and when we don't use, and that's always a big indicator with children is if they can't balance, there's something else going on inside their bodies, and they have lack of trunk control. I mean, I can go on and on about the muscles in the kids' bodies and what happens, but as far as like even just playing with balance, whether you're an adult or a child, or maybe you play with your child and you try and stand on one foot. You might have a chair nearby to help you. Or what does it feel like to sit down in the chair and only use one foot to try and get up? And those are all things. A lot of the work that I start with is balance, is fun related activities. With the kids, I don't usually bring the parents into it until like the second or the third session because it's very interesting to see how the parents will either be willingly do it or there is this like they're inhibited to do it. It could be a multitude of things. It could be lack of confidence in their own body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like you have mentioned a lot of these because I'm hearing connecting with kids, breath work, play through movement, all sorts of things. But do you have any simple or really accessible ways that parents or educators in the classroom can start to support regulation through movement? Do you have any
Yes.
additional
Oh gosh.
suggestions?
One of the things that I am going to say that you have access to walls and chairs in your classrooms and desks or tables. And I think that getting the kids up out of their chairs and moving before they have to perform a task, or if you notice that all of your kids can't sit at group time and they can't sit pretty and crisscross the applesauce, stop what you're doing, stand up, have them jump, have them put their arms out to their sides and twist side to side, or even a side bend, like even from sitting in a chair, or better yet, standing and moving and doing side bending. Because when you're side bending, it opens up the little tiny muscles between your rib cage and it allows the kids to breathe deeper. Taking their hands, I don't know if you can see me, Carrie, but
Mhm.
putting them on their lung or on their rib cage, but teaching them about their body in regards to like how our ribs protect our lungs, which are like is like a balloon. So we're going to blow a balloon up and you breathe in and breathe that belly big, let your belly get big, and then you breathe out, but you're going to go slow. Or maybe the kids are really fired up and you want to do some things that are going to help bring them down. And this is one that I've done in yoga but there's also other ones. It's called the lion's breath. And so but when you do it with the kids, like getting on all fours and actually taking a breath in and just let it go, like that audible sound with the kids can be really, really helpful. But then doing one followed by that might be you breathe in through your nose, but then you breathe out slow. So you might count like 1 through 4, giving the kids things that are going to stimulate. So the vagus nerve runs on either side of our neck, and giving the kids things that are going to stimulate that, meaning the sounding of like a bumblebee. So buzzing or just humming. Hum and do it sustaining. And you might find that things like that. Or I like to do, give the kids choices, and maybe we do it with the sounds of the alphabet. So you might do like an A sound and hum it out. So you're going to like in yoga, we do like Om, but here you might do other sounds that make it just makes it a really like good reverberation. The V sound is another sound that really, it's kind of hard for the kids to do at first, especially if they're really young, but that VU, like, and Dr. Peter Levine, who does a lot of he's done a lot with felt sense, but it's experiencing. He does a lot of the things like that with breath. But I think that the more and more that we can get our kids to have an understanding that our breath is our superpower. And when we can tap into our breath, and you might even, I don't have one in here, Carrie, I didn't even think to bring it in, but they're called a Hoberman spear. So it is
The little expandable bottle.
yes. But what I like about I don't have one in here. What I like about the Hoberman spear is it gives a visual cue. And I actually, for your listeners, if you go to, I have a YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, and I'm actually demonstrating with the Hoberman spear breath work to be done with kids. And it's Studio T Pilates 157 is my YouTube channel. So there are a few. I don't have as many. It's kind of an eclectic channel because I've had podcasts and I've had other things on there. But you'll see they're not very long videos. So
I love that. I will put the YouTube
yeah.
video
And
handle
then
in the show notes.
yeah. And then the other thing
Can
that
find
I'm
them.
just going to say, and I think you'll be okay if I plug it in here, is I created a 21-day course, and there's parents can do it within a 15-minute increment. And it's got an education piece for the parent, and then a move piece for the adults and the children, or maybe just the children, and then an explore. So it's learn, move, explore. And each day is all different. And it's super cheap right now. I am only charging $17 for the 21-day course. Right now, you're going to have unlimited access to it. After the holidays, actually, if your listeners are doing it, I'll just keep it where it's at for them. If we don't see this until after Christmas, I understand. I think that there's a lot of things in there, and it's talking about breathing and moving, and why it's important.
That's amazing. And oh my gosh, yeah, that's a steal for $17.
And there's like 41, 42 videos that are in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, after all of this, what do you think your biggest concern right now is for children and their families when it comes to this topic in general?
I think that um I'm seeing an increase of dysregulated families, and having tools that are easily accessible without having a lot of cost involved. And that's why I kept the course cheap, because I want people to be able to access it and not need necessarily a ton of props to do it. I think that the biggest thing is awareness. It's understanding that typically we are parent the same way that we were raised as children. And if you had a mother or a father who was a dysregulated person, more than likely you're going to have some of those characteristics as well. But it's understanding that we can change.
So, with that being said, what is giving you the most hope?
So I talked briefly about the course through Butler, but there's also a word called neuroplasticity, which means that our brains can, even as adults, our brains can change. So learning new ways of coping mechanisms, learning new ways to begin to relate to others, learning to set boundaries for yourself. So the hope would be that, we can find change within ourselves, but it's got to start with us first. We want to make change with the children, but yet I feel like there's so many school districts that if they looked at what Dr. Lori is doing, and there's a lot of school districts that are beginning to hop on board with her messaging, I guess is what I'm going to say. Because it starts with the educator, it starts with the parent, it starts with the caregivers.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah,
So if someone listening today just took away one message, what would you hope that would be?
awareness of their nervous system, but also awareness. And we didn't even talk about when you're constantly in a high stress level mode, like your body's always in stress. It might not be showing it right now, but down the line, it can cause health problems that could be prevented with a little bit of awareness, a little bit of movement. And I'm not talking about going out and walking 5 miles a day, just gentle, easy movement that whether it's yoga with you or yoga or Pilates with me, I'm just using that as an example, but I think that having an understanding that it only takes one person in a child's life to be doing the work that you're doing to make a difference. One person that child can count on that is halfway regulated.
Oh my goodness, that is so important. I love that. And but it's so hard even, because I have young adult children and they don't think about, they'll just run, run, run and go, go, go and not take care of themselves and and put pressure on themselves. And I try to remind them to slow down a little and take a breath and drink some water. So yeah, that high stress level, even if you're not feeling it, will accumulate and it will catch up to you.
But drinking water from a straw or even out of a bottle, it can be so downregulating. Or sitting, like even, I mean, I would do anything like just to go outside and put my feet in the grass, like where you are, or just to feel the sun on your body. I mean, or look up and see all because you guys still have green leaves on your trees.
We
I mean,
do.
I know, but it's so those kinds of things, being outside in nature can be an automatic reset. I think that we like, and that's, to me, that's free. You don't have to do anything. Go outside. I saw this and I thought it was really cool. Is if even for the adults, we all have access to bubbles, blowing bubbles with both the adults, but also with the children. They can be so down regulating for our kids.
Oh my goodness, that's so much fun. I keep a pack of bubbles.
So this what I saw was so funny because it was talking about a school, and instead of showing the teachers like going out, they went outside and congregated like at this outside door, and there were three of them that were blowing bubbles, and I was like, it just made me laugh because it's like, I would hope it, because so you ask about hope. I've seen education from when I would have grown up to where we are now. And there's just so much change in the lack of motor movement for young children, the lack of learning how to ride a bike, the lack of, like,
Climbing
even
and jumping and
climbing and jumping. Yes. And I think that I'm just going to say this and then I'm going to be quiet, is one of my students, I had her in one of my Pilates classes, and we talked about the work that I was doing with Move Into Calm. And she came to me, it was probably midway through the semester, and she was so excited because her son finally learned how to ride a bike and he was 11. I said to her, "What do you think, what changed?" And she said, "Me, because I used to always be afraid of him falling. And she put that fear on him, so he didn't want to even try because he thought he was going to fall. And I said, but we all have those kinds of things. And sometimes just allowing our children to take risks, to climb, to ride bikes, it's so important. And so many, especially women, don't want the kids to take risks.
Yeah, it's hard.
I know.
As a mom, I know it's hard. Yeah, I will say you talking about going outside made me think about this. My 10-year-old sometimes will just he'll head out the front door and I'll say, "What are you doing?" He'll say, "I'm going to get morning sun in my eyes."
But there's studies though, Carrie, that are done that talk about seeing the morning sunlight within 30 minutes of your day can change your whole demeanor for the whole day.
Yes.
So
Yeah. And so I just love, so speaking of hope, yes,
yeah,
hopefully we have a generation of 10-year-olds coming up that know to go get morning sun in your
well,
eye.
to get morning sun, but also to just sit and just listen. Maybe it's listening to the birds.
Right.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
Carrie, thank you so much for having me. This has
Thank
been a
you.
wonderful conversation.
So much
Yeah.
fun. So Tammy, just real quick, so we talked about your YouTube channel. Will you tell everybody where to find you or where they can connect with you?
Yes. Okay. So on Instagram, and I have a fairly big presence both on Instagram and Facebook. So on Instagram, you can find me. It's Studio T Pilates MI, which is for Michigan. And on Facebook, you can find me under Tami Lysher. I do have a studio page, but for the move into calm, I keep it more on my personal page. And then I also will send you a link to connect with the 21-day course that I have. I'll give you my email address. So if anybody has any questions at all, don't hesitate but to email me. And I would love to hear from some of your listeners.
Thank you, Tammy, for joining me.
Thank you.
So much
Yeah, thank
fun.
you.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you enjoyed this episode, follow the show and share it with someone who cares about showing up well for kids. And if you feel called to create real impact in your own community through movement, mindfulness, and whole child learning, you can find out more about becoming a certified PlayMotion Kids instructor at playmotionkids.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, don't forget to make a little time to play, and now get out there and go save the world.